this House believes that Britain should leave the European Union.
Right. A lot of people have been asking me what this debate is actually about. Well, sometime either this year or next year, we will actually be voting on whether to leave the European Union, which is what we're in at the moment, or whether we should actually remain in the European Union. But it's not just voting to leave it to remain in the European Union. Joy of joys, it will be a vote to remain in a reformed European Union. Our Prime Minister David Cameron has been on a tour of most of the other European Union countries to get some reforms of our membership. And he's actually said that if we weren't already a member, he would actually vote for us to join now with these reforms. Let's just imagine if we weren't actually in the EU and we were voting on whether we had to join. Our PM will be standing up making a speech like this.
Britain, I know we've done pretty well over the past several hundred years. We've had full control over our laws. Our Supreme Court has been supreme. We've had the ability to decide the quantity and the quality of who comes into this country. We've had our unique voice on the world stage. But I've got an idea. We'll join the EU. We'll hand over control of our borders, opening our door to almost 500 million people. We'll get unelected, faceless government officials from across Europe to decide 75% of our laws. We'll give up our seat with the World Trade Organization, and to top it all off, we'll pay a membership fee. This fee will cost us £55 million a day.
Does that sound like a good deal to you?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, it's unfortunately what we actually have at the moment. So let's picture Britain outside of the European Union. We'd make a gross saving of £55 million per day. We'd also have back control of our borders, and we'd also be able to decide 100%, not 25%, on our laws. But at least we would actually have our say in that hypothetical world. So let's not forget, Britain has never actually been asked whether or not we wanted to join a political union. We've only ever been asked if we wanted to join an economic community. It was all about trade back when we started with our relationship with Europe. So that's why I represent the Leave campaign. I believe that the British people are the best people to decide the future of their own country. In short, I believe in Britain. There is now a clear and growing voice in this country, which started as a murmur in the pubs and the clubs and the common rooms and wherever people would generally congregate in this country. And what it is saying is get Britain out.
Okay, so in our debate today, we'll be talking about the future of the UK and the European Union. But to start with, I'd like to take us back to the past. Just over 70 years ago, Europe was being torn apart by the second conflict in a generation. And now we see sustained peace, which is what the whole aim of the European Union was about. So now we've ticked that box. We're looking for further prosperity for all of the nations inside the EU, including the UK. So now it's different. We're looking forward and we're looking for more trade, freedom of movement of capital, goods, services and people to improve the economic environment for everyone inside the EU. Surely we're better off in the EU, trading in a free market with a consumer base of 742.5 million people, which makes up 7% of the world population. However, although it's only 7% of the world population, we have 25% of the GDP of the world. So it shows that we have a huge economic influence as a part of Europe, as a general continent working together to strive for a better welfare for its people. Surely we must stay in because we get lower consumer prices. If the UK is in the European Union, we have a larger market. So that means that there's more competition in the markets, so the prices will be driven down for all of us on our food, our clothes, everything that we buy. Also, firms will be able to achieve economies of scale, so they'll be able to produce at lower costs, and therefore the price will be passed on to the consumer, so we'll also get lower costs. Immigration, the opposition team will probably be talking quite a lot about immigration, but I believe that if we did leave the EU, then we would still be subject to legislation passed by the EU, because we'd be part of a European economic area, which means that we're not in fact free. We are expected to follow the rules of the European Union, even though we're not in it. It just means that we're not at the table at the meetings to to decide what we should do and what influence we have.
First we start with Sam. Let's start with our saying the goals.
Off you go. Right. So, the argument from the other team is that if we left this European Union, we would actually have less global influence. Well, I would actually argue that we already have a pretty insignificant influence as it is. As 1 in 28, we don't actually have that much say. There's been 40 occasions on which the Council of Ministers have overruled us. Our Parliament have actually downvoted several European constitutions on 40 occasions. On every one of those times, we've actually seen these laws implemented into our legislation. And also, as part of the G20.
Right, so our influence in the world as it stands today, if we exclude the European Union, we are members of G20, G8, we have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, and not only that, but we are at the heart of a Commonwealth of 53 nations. So we're not insignificant in the world, and NATO.
So, in terms of clout and influence, I'd say we've got plenty enough there as it is already, without this European Union strangling our voice. Immigration?
Just before we launch that, I think this is supposed to be a sort of time question, so I'm going to give them a chance to respond to that point.
Yeah.
And then
Right, so the opposition is essentially arguing about democracy and the democracy of the EU. Well, they haven't really provided any facts. The European Council votes by qualified majority voting. This means there must be a broad consensus for decisions to be made. Under this, the UK has the joint highest number of votes, meaning it has a larger say than smaller nations. There isn't going to be some sort of 1984-esque dystopian vision of the future where we have no say in the mattering global trade and in the EU. That's simply not true. We have the 4th highest number of MEPs. Remember, we actually vote on members of the European Council, members of the European Parliament. They're not just sort of pulled out of the air from the Conservative Party. We vote for them. It's the electorate's responsibility to be engaged with the political discussion and the movement in this country. We also elect the Conservative Party in this country, or we did at the last general election, and they appoint officials to represent us in the European Union. So this sort of idea that there isn't democracy and the idea that we don't have a say and we don't have a place to air our views is just it's untrue, essentially.
Right. So, well, actually, I'd like people to find about democracy. We'll move on to immigration soon, but democracy again. Now, actually, 75% of our laws are made in Brussels at the European Commission. Now, we elect, every half a decade, we elect members of European Parliament. Now, the European Parliament does not actually have any legislative power. They cannot propose legislation, they cannot repeal legislation, they can't even initiate anything to do with legislation. All of that comes from the European Commission in Brussels. Now, the European Commission is not actually elected by anybody. They're a bunch of representatives, or a bunch of officials selected from further officials within the European Union. It's bureaucracy upon bureaucracy. So, really, these people whom we've never even heard of are taking the biggest and most important decisions in our everyday lives. And we have absolutely no say or influence at all.
One thing that I would like to add to that is that when talking about the European institution, 66% of complaints filed against any EU-based institution are against the EU Commission, who make all the laws. 36% of all of those complaints are about lack of transparency, because we just don't know what they're doing, and they're not giving us a say.
Yeah, I'm not sure where those statistics are coming from. This is a report done by the Council of Commons Library entitled "How much legislation comes from Europe?" Statutes and secondary legislation, 14.1%. So I'm not quite sure where the opposition is pulling these figures, but they're certainly not fact. We do have an estimation of 50% of UK legislation with a significant economic impact comes from Europe, but that is economic legislation that comes from the single market, and the single market is not a bad thing. I'm not sure if we're going to move on to the economics of the EU further on in the debate, but if we just talk a little bit about the single market, we have 200,000 UK businesses that deal with the EU, and this is a letter to the Financial Times entitled "Japanese Business People Want the UK to Stay in the EU." Now, this was done by someone who's a representative in Japan, who represents Intercultural Consulting, and he basically says that there are 200 Japanese businesses that he knows of that if the UK was to pull out of the EU, they would very much consider moving their headquarters and their base of operations into the European Union because they have a single market and the free movement of trade. What does that mean for us? Well, that means we lose jobs. That means that we don't get tax revenue from these companies. These are all things that are going to happen when we pull out of the EU. We're going to see a shift of companies moving into the EU, into countries like France, Germany, Poland, and strengthening their bases there. And that's not something that we want to happen.
I'd like to respond to that point. So, firstly, they've moved on to Project Fear, haven't they? They tried to scare us into staying in the European Union, right? By saying this business will move from Britain into the European Union if we leave. Well, actually, Toyota have confirmed, you've got the chief executive of Toyota, Abbie, I believe I'm speaking on, has actually clearly said Toyota will continue to make cars within the English Midlands despite us leaving. Same again with Nissan. They've invested hundreds of millions of pounds recently to contribute over the next 5, 10, 15 years. So I very much doubt that they're afraid. As we say to my other sugar company, we all make sugar, they're absolutely certain, this is a senior official, they're absolutely certain that their business and the business people will have a more secure future outside of the EU. So in terms of the whole business will move away, we'll lose jobs, I'm not so sure. Plus, there's also some law on fishing. This country has 200 miles of territorial waters. And since we've joined this union, we've actually had to share our 200 miles, which are rightfully ours, but to share it with the rest of the European Union, which has led, in the fishing industry, in the fishing market, it's led to an 82% loss on average overall for fishermen. So, thousands of jobs have been lost in that sector, and I believe Will is wanting to make a point, so I'm going to it.
I would like to make a point. In fact, I'd like to pick up on the fact that they use the term single market. Now, when they refer to the single market, that is the market that is the European Union, and the free trade surrounding the European Union. Now, that is what we joined the EU for. When it was, you know,
All about trade.
when it was all about trade, that's it. When it was just an idea, that was why we joined. It was a market of free trade. Now, Norway, Turkey, and Switzerland are all a part of this. They are all in the European market. For example, Switzerland pay under 600 million Swiss francs a year to have full access to the EU market, whilst not being members. Because if they were members, they'd have to pay 3.4 billion a year to have access to the same market, but have the laws that restrict them as well. There are millions of different ways that we can go around having to have the laws, but still be able to have access to such an expansive market that makes up such a large percentage of GDP. For example, a Nordic model and do what the Scandinavian countries do. For example, the Nordic Council have reached out and said that we could join them and have a free trade with them as well. Countries that are far more developed than us in some senses, offering a hand to us because they also have found ways around this, the restrictions and limitations of the EU place upon us.
I'm going to give the opposition a chance to speak.
Okay, firstly, we're not a Scandinavian country. we're a financial capital of the world. Like like Norway, like they're not where it's at. We have London. But we are a financial institution which relies on other countries to trade with, because we export a lot of finance and we import other goods from countries inside the European Union. I'd like to just go back to Joe's point about fishing. Unfortunately, our economy is not built on fishing, so it's fine for us to share that with others. We export billions of pounds worth of financial services, which is much more beneficial to our economy. And we are big receivers of foreign direct investment. In 2011, we received $1.2 trillion, which was the second largest stock of inward foreign direct investment in the world. Now, if we were outside of the EU, I would like to think that we would receive a lot less foreign direct investment, because we're not as lucrative to businesses. For example, Nissan, they came to us in the 1980s. We were inside the EU because they wanted to get into the EU market. If they weren't inside the EU, they would have to pay tariffs of 9.8% of the cars to be able to sell in the EU market. But by locating in the UK, they were able to get into that by using free trade. Also, Nissan has created 6,000 jobs in the North East. Now, the North East was in decline at the time, shipbuilding had just diminished, so we really needed that creation of jobs to push the economy on. And Nissan were looking to go to France or the UK, and they chose the UK. But if we weren't inside the EU, then I'm sure they would have chosen France.
This is an excerpt from a UN Global Development report. This was released on the 9th of January this year, so this is probably the most up-to-date you're going to get relative statistics in this debate. And I'd just like to read a few expert comments. One, the EU is now the driving force behind world trade growth, supported by a high level of inter-regional trade and also by competitiveness gains relative to the United States. Do we really want to leave the EU now because we think it's all bad and it's taking away our democracy, which is not, when the UN are declaring it the driving force behind the world economy? And I'd just like to refer to the countries that they were talking about: Norway, Switzerland. Liechtenstein is also a nation that trades with the EU, but does not get a seat at the table. Outside of the EU, Norway and Switzerland have experienced a sharp slowdown in economic activity due to less inter-regional trade with Europe. They do not get a seat at the table, and this is extremely important, because if we were to leave the EU, yes, maybe we would be able to do trade deals with the EU, but we would not be able to decide legislation. We wouldn't be able to sit there and veto decisions made by the Commission. It'd be the worst decision, essentially, because we'd have EU laws put upon us, and we won't get a say in how those laws are written. So it would be a complete disaster for democracy. There is a net deficit of democracy if we leave the EU relative to if we stay in the EU, and that's not what I want to be part of. I want to be part of a global union and be part of the EU where we have more democracy, not less. I don't want rules imposed on us. I want to sit at the table. I want to be able to talk with other countries and make decisions with them and come to an amicable agreement. That's what we have to strive for, and that's why I think we should stay in.
We're going to take a couple of minutes of questions from the floor. So if you've got a question directed to either of the teams, then if you've got any questions from the floor direct to one team or the other team, not just a general question, then we'll take a few minutes of those before the two sides close. And we'll start with Natalie.
This is for Joe. I was just wondering, you talk about all these restrictions, these laws that will be restricting us if we stayed in the EU. Can you please give me some examples?
Right, okay. Right. Firstly, this is actually very good, so it links onto a point I wanted to make whilst I was speaking. We've lost, in Register, 2,200 jobs, 270 jobs in Scotland, 765 in Wales, and 900 in Scunthorpe on the seal industry. We've got, okay? Now, this has happened because we've allowed in competition from China, okay? We've allowed in cheap Chinese imports of steel. Now, if we weren't in the EU, okay, we'd actually stop that. We could impose a form of protectionism, where we impose tariffs on the Chinese to import to our country, to export to our country, rather, okay? And that would in turn say that would protect our steel industry. But because we're in the European Union, we have to abide by their lesser duty rule, which actually bans this form of protectionism. So therefore, if we left, we'd be free of all of them rules, and we'd still have plenty of jobs in the steel.
The steel industry is a dying industry. That's why it's important to know.
He's responding to your question. So. Okay, I'll take Aaron. Question.
Okay, well, thank you, Barry. I'll just go back to what you said about the figure of the number of laws that we suggested. If you said it was 40 that have been turned back.
There were 40 pieces from the European Council of Ministers, yes.
Right. So, right.
Does that answer your question already?
I was just wondering, what is that in terms of percentage of the total number of laws? Because 40 on its own doesn't mean anything.
All 40 that there was between 2010 and 2000, the last Parliament, okay, there was only 40, and we voted against all 40, and we were overruling all 40.
So, do you mean we only voted against 40 laws?
That is
proposed,
what
there were only 40 laws proposed, and we voted against them all.
There weren't laws as such, but that is what the Constitution which our government had the opportunity to.
Has anybody got a question they'd like to direct to the opposition teams? I don't want to push you one side. Okay. Anybody got any more questions at all?
Right, as you're all aware, farmers receive a subsidy from the European Union. If we leave the European Union, will the subsidy cease?
Right, okay, well firstly, as we mentioned before, we're paying a membership fee of gross £55 million per day. Now, European Union money, there's no such thing as European Union money. Subsidies which farmers get are only a small fraction of what we pay in every day. If we were to leave, we could keep our membership fee and still be able to subsidise everything which the European Union already directly subsidises, or indirectly, which we already indirectly subsidise through the European Union. But basically we cut the middleman.
For example, when we're talking about specifically agricultural subsidies, and then I want to move on to education subsidies as well. This comes from the BBC. Okay, sorry. So France received 10 billion in agricultural subsidies between 2007 and 2014. We received 4 billion, and there's been no indication as to how that's been spread out or anything else. Once again, because of a lack of transparency.
Joe, you're saying saving that money will still give it to the farmers. Is that something you think sounds ideal and sounds nice, or is that something that's actually been promised?
Now that is something which is open to debate as to whether or not the farmers should still be subsidised, whether that's not the key issue.
I'm afraid I'm going to let them decide first because we do need to.
No, it's left to dictate. It's quickly, it's a yes or no answer. This subsidy money, they spent £112 million developing a new system to enter all this. Now, was it effective of European money to spend £112 million on a programme that doesn't work?
What programme is this, sorry?
It's a it was all the subsidies were entered onto a paper format, and they made a programme to enter it onto a computer version. Now, was it efficient to spend £112 million of this EU money on this programme that doesn't work?
How do you have evidence that it doesn't work?
Because we had to go back to paper methods. The release is gone,
Dyson, you want to get down here?
I don't know if it works or not. I'm not as good as you are apparently. But what I can tell you, which is what the opposition failed to do, is yes, the cap subsidies will end if we leave the EU. The reason that France gets more cap subsidies than we do is because they have a much more backwards farming process. That's not offensive, it's a fact. We have 1.6 of our economy is based on farming, and that produces 60% of our food. Okay, so we have a much more efficient process, so that's why we receive less cap payments, but we still receive a quite significant amount more. So yeah, I don't know if this program was more efficient or not, but it's all relative. So
It never worked.
just hold on. 112 million. That's a lot of money, but relative to the GDP of the EU, which is in the trillions, it's not that much money. And I'm not sure on the exactness of the program, so I can't really say whether it's good or not. But you've got to take all these moneyed amounts into a relative perspective. That's all.
Okay. I'm going to we are running quite short on time, so I'm going to limit your closing statements to 90 seconds.
So lucky you are, thanks.
Make them quickly in 90 seconds. That's really good.
Okay, right, so back to trade again, right? We are actually banned from making our own trade deals as a nation, okay? That has to be done through the European Union, as the European Union, with all these other countries. At the moment, the EU are trying to strike up a free trade deal with the USA, okay? Now it's known as the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, what a mouthful, I know. So we can abbreviate this to TTIP. Now these TTIP deals are actually going on largely in private, but some provisions from this have leaked out, okay? Now one of the main provisions of TTIP is to open up Europe's public health, water and education services to American investment. This could essentially mean the privatisation of the NHS at this time. And also, that's the whole Project Fear thing, okay? Now, they're telling us that if we left the European Union, you know, the City of London would close down, jobs would be lost, the sun wouldn't rise in the morning. We heard these arguments once before. I'm talking to teachers and staff in the room now, and I remember from 15, 16, 17 years ago. Don't look at me like that, it's not that long ago. When Britain was debating whether or not to join the euro, okay? Now politicians and business people that came forward at the time, and they made exactly the same arguments, okay? They said, if we were not to join the euro, right, then the City of London would close down, jobs would be lost, the sun wouldn't rise in the morning. Same arguments what we're hearing today. And we're hearing it from exactly the same people, okay? These people... well, not these people, on the bigger political sphere. We're hearing it from people like Ken Clark. People, I've got better than that. People like Nick Clegg. I was very famous once though, trust me. But there was also people like Richard Branson. And, top of the list, there was Tony Blair!
Okay, we've got our background section. We're going to need to okay, closing statements, please start, please.
Right. What Joe is trying to argue is that if we don't leave the EU, we'll never go back to our glory days. Our former past, our sort of Britain rules the world atmosphere. Well, I've got news for Joe. We're not as significant as people like to think we are anymore. We need to be part of these unions because it provides a group of people of which we can go to the world stage and argue our positions. Okay? We have the 5th largest economy in the world, not the 1st. We can't play America world police. That's not going to be our role in the world. It's never going to be anymore. Okay? We have 200,000 businesses in the UK that have links with the EU. If we leave the EU and we leave the single market, then there's going to be more import tariffs, more export tariffs. You're going to end up paying more for services and just everything in general. You're going to pay more for your bottle of water, your books, your pens, everything. That's just going to be how it works. On the amount that we pay into the EU, we pay about £340 per head into the EU, okay, per household. But we get back in foreign direct investment £3,000 per household. Now, you don't need to be a maths professor to realise that we get a net benefit from that investment. Yes, we pay into the EU, but it benefits us in the long term. An argument for them is probably going to be that we're giving this money into the EU and it's going to countries like Poland, who are less developed than the UK. But we need to help those countries develop so we become an even stronger union. We can't just quit because we think that we're giving away too much of our own money. When we give away our money, it's an investment, it's a long-term investment. You can't just pull out when you think the going is getting tough. You have to stick these things out. Now, I don't know about you, but Joe was talking about the TTIP deal. If we leave the EU completely, cut off all our ties, no, we won't be part of TTIP. I'm not a fan of TTIP, but we need to be in the EU to be able to negotiate those deals and make a better deal for us. I think we've already put in a caveat that says the NHS won't be affected by TTIP, so I think that's all right. Don't get fear-mongered by the fact that our healthcare is not going to be privatised. But if we're outside of the trade deals for TTIP, then America doesn't really have a reason to trade with us. I mean, what do we really export? The industries, when we pull out of the EU, will want to move into the EU and then trade with America with that, because that provides a single market and a freer market. We will be very isolated. We forget that we're only 50 kilometers from mainland Europe, okay? We are not this sort of maverick country that can take on the world stage. We will be swatted out there. We think that we can do more trade with China. Germany trades with China three times more than we do. So China aren't going to be looking to us, and the protectionist deals with steel. Well, do you want to buy cheap steel from China and lose a few jobs, but then train those workers in other industries? Or do you want to be paying extremely high prices for steel, which companies will not buy in the UK and then move to the EU? It's a continuous cycle. Once we move out, companies will realise that being in the EU, being in a free market, will be so much better for them, and then they will move there, because at the end of the day, companies, especially public companies, they have a burden to their shareholders. They don't care whether you have a job. They don't care about your standard of living. They care about how much money their stocks and shares are worth, so they can get paid higher dividends. And they will get paid higher dividends by being in the EU.
There's a debate. You have to sit. I'm sorry. That's how it goes.
We're taking more time.
You spoke first, they speak last. Right, your proposition. So, could we please have a show of hands? And I'm going to ask Ms. Cox and Ms. Bainbridge to count for me, because I'm not very good. Could we have a show of hands, please? All those that support the proposition that this House should leave the European Union, please. Can we have hands in the air?
I think some people that
We have hands like properly, clearly in the air, because there's struggling here.
There's definitely not.
Don't put your hand up. There's no point.
Okay, opposition.
Can we vote?
Yeah.
Are you doing the
I think by 26 votes to 22. The opposition.
Thank you, everyone. It's brilliant.